Welcome to the Life to the Max podcast with your hosts, Janna Breslin and Evan DeMarco. Life to the Max is the adventure of two people who set out to prove that there is still hope. It is a journey across the globe where they seek to tell great stories of inspirational people making a real difference in the world, and maybe have a little fun along the way. Life to the Max, where adventure meets responsibility. Well, we're here in Vegas. Welcome back to the podcast, you guys. Life to the Max. Today we're here with AJ Richards. Welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
We just met you like 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
So we know a little bit about you. We've gotten into some really interesting conversations, but why don't you tell our listeners who you are and what you do and all the good stuff.
So AJ Richards, I'm 36. I'm a father of 3 girls. Married to my high school sweetheart. She stuck it out through combat tours and deployments and all that fun stuff. And being an asshole and learning how to not be an asshole. She stuck it out the whole time, and I've learned a lot from her.
Let's give her a hand.
Yeah, seriously. This one's for you, babe.
Yeah.
And I had a CrossFit gym I owned for about 7 years in Mesa. And then during that time, I started a head-to-head fitness competition called Rush Club that did really well for a while. We grew that to about 250,000 live viewers per show. And then all of that came crashing down from a business choice that was made that we didn't have all the ins and outs of. And so bankruptcy just in November of last year, sort of resetting, recalibrating, putting everything into perspective. You know, it's easy to talk about how to be during times of being down and all of that stuff when you're up. It's another thing to apply it when you're down. Mm-hmm. And so I definitely had an opportunity to learn that whole experience and process and see the fruits of the labor, if you will, from saying, okay, listen, asshole, you've been preaching this. Now it's time to live it. Mm-hmm. And what I certainly learned was during that time was if you are willing to show up for yourself, how you present yourself is what matters, right? So if I was being sort of miserable and ungrateful of anything in social media and sort of poor me, the next opportunities, one, I wouldn't have been in the right mindset to see them, and 2, nobody would have approached me, because who wants to be around a Debbie Downer? You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
So went through all that, and so now here I am. I'm a coach, a transformation coach, a self-development coach I'm a contractor for a couple of different weight loss organizations, and I do it for myself as well. Have some clients of my own.
Wonderful.
That's awesome.
So I want to. How much of this mentality, right? I love this mentality because I think especially in our world and health and wellness and fitness and transformation, everyone loves to talk about rah.
Right.
Like, this is how good I am. This is what I've done. But very few people are vulnerable enough to say, yeah, I kind of hit rock bottom.
Yeah,
you know?
like here's the real.
Yeah, and I love this, right? Like this is awesome, and thank you so much for sharing that, right? Because I think again, it's we don't get enough of that vulnerability, especially in this world where you can say like, well, yeah, I actually hit rock bottom, and now it's time for me to practice what I preach. How much of what you talk about in your platform comes from your time, in the military and kind of really experiencing that, and how much of that is just self-taught? I mean, talk to us a little bit about how you kind of came up with this philosophy and this backbone.
Through experience, trial and error, right? Sometimes I question whether or not I want to go to school to get a 3-letter designation in front of or behind my name, but and there's certainly nothing wrong with that. However, I don't in particular want some professor who learned it from a book but never applied it in real life or with clients in real life to tell me this is what's working. There's before the internet and the information being so available, scientists would discover a scientific breakthrough in the medical field that would take 40 years to get into practice. Something that actually worked, but it took 40 years for trial and errors, then to get the information out there, then to get it presented, and then so by the time it's being used, it's outdated.
Yeah.
The new information's coming up and they're figuring it out. So a good example is when I owned my gym, I had a gentleman call me who had a spinal cord injury, and he's paralyzed in a wheelchair. And he said, I have a T11, T12 spinal cord injury. It's not complete, which means it's not severed. So I can gain some mobility back, but I've done a 1.5 years of traditional physical therapy, and I'm at a standstill. Nothing's changing. And I said, dude, I have no clue how to work with a spinal cord injury.
Yeah.
I have a CrossFit level 1 certification. You know what I mean? But I'm also an outside the box thinker. And I said, if I'm not going to tell you no, but I need you to know that I have no experience.
Yeah.
So you're coming in
Just
here.
Just be aware.
Yeah. You're coming here on your own, at your own risk. And I said, but if you do come here, I'm going to treat you as if you're the last person on the planet. Because I have to assume that one of the worst things about being paralyzed is your independence.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to treat you and coach you as if nobody's here. I'm going to put you in scenarios and environments that the real world would present. You fell out of your chair, or you have to get something or whatever, but you're going to have to figure it out. And if you fall, you fall. And he's like, take me away, Dr. Frankenstein. I'd never met this guy. He says that on the phone. I'm like, who am I dealing with?
Well, what did I just sign up for?
Yeah. So,
and does my insurance cover this?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
That's pretty bold on his end as well.
Totally.
To just be like, okay.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is just who this guy was. He became a business partner later on in Rush Club. But anyway, he comes in and within 6 months he was walking.
Wow.
Yeah, 6 months.
Wow.
He the first time he came in, I basically said, look, okay, what I do know about spinal cord injury is you may not feel your legs, but that doesn't mean they can't work. So let's test that. So I basically hung a big, thick rubber band from the ceiling, from a ring, for the muscle ups, so that as he pulled himself up, the band would give. So at some point, muscles would have to engage whether he felt them or not. If it was a solid object like a rope he could use all upper body and we wouldn't really know how much he was engaging. And I said, now listen, if you're going to fall, just hold it because it's not going to let you crash.
Yeah.
It'll basically lower you down. And he did 3 and then fell over. And I said, great, now get up. And I didn't know, but that was the moment he knew he was in the right gym because I didn't rush over. I didn't have a laundry list of insurance compliances I had to follow. At least I didn't know that would have him. Because when you go to therapy, you're in harnesses and you have all these different safety protocols that, in some instances, keep people from progressing.
Yeah. As you said, they protect you from real world scenarios.
Yeah. Look at a baby trying to walk. There's no harness that keeps them from falling all the way through the house. If they crash, they crash. And they get back up, And so when I said that, he's like, that was it. So I feel like if I was to go to school, and so with that scenario, I'm like, I never had a professor tell me that a T11, T12 can't. That never infected my mind, my thought process. You go to school and they're going to teach you what they know, and what they know may not be true. They just haven't tested it. And most of the time, the professors are teaching, they're not doing, right? And that's not always the case. And that's not to say there's not some beautifully phenomenal professors out there.
Right.
So when it comes to the mental, emotional, and psychological world of coaching people, it's through trial and error. And then it's going to seminars and listening to people that are also doing that. They've been doing it for decades longer than I have. Byron Katie is somebody who I just absolutely admire.
Okay, we look at each other because when we were just in Utah, like what we said, we interviewed someone who uses her work, and we talked a lot on our podcast about Byron Katie, and just anyway, the universe is doing something or whatever, but it's crazy.
Is.
Cool.
Yeah,
we're going to ask you 4 questions right now.
I ask all my clients 4 questions.
And you probably know which ones, right?
Yeah. Is it true? Does it serve me? Who would I be without the thought? So studying people like Byron Katie and what they've done that's helped people. My first coach, Steve Hardison, and how he served people, and then Steve Chandler, who he worked with. And there's this whole lineage of coaches that don't have 3-letter designations, but yet the people they've served have made profound impacts on our planet and in their own personal lives. And so it's from my own experiences and from listening to my clients and watching them. I learn as much from my clients and from being with them as anything. It might sound a little phooey, but if I live with integrity, and my integrity in my life is what it is with my spirituality, my personal relationships, how I treat myself, how I talk about myself, and so forth. If I live with an integrity, then when I show up with my clients, I'm just holding space. So I become a mirror or a conduit to coach them. Half the time, I don't know half the shit I'm saying to them. I know that might sound crazy, but that's the case. I'm just being there. And so I'll say something and be like, now say that again. And I'm like, it's gone.
I can't remember.
I don't know what I said. And really it's because I remove myself. It's nothing to do with me. There's no ego being served by being there. It's 100% in service of the human being I'm sitting with.
So you hit the nail on the head, and I don't want to lose this train of thought, but just so you know, and I think we kind of talked about this a little bit, is that's what this podcast is about, right? Because there's so many health and wellness podcasts out there, and we can talk about what methods and all that, but at the end of the day, we want to shine a light on the people that are really bringing service out there. It's, who's making a difference. And I think that's one of the reasons we were so excited to interview you is this. And this is, you're making a difference. And does all of this service kind of stem back from, your past life? How do you develop this fire, right? Because I think so many people want to feel like they have that to give and don't know how to go down the path of being like, I bring service to.
Yeah. That's a great question. So once my ego is out of the way, certainly. The old version of me didn't know what the ego was and how much of it was controlling, like it was about me trying to get recognition or whatever, which, it's a challenge for me because I've learned so much about the ego that I have a really hard time promoting myself on social media. Like my social media game sucks, right? Because I'm like, I don't want to have to play that game because there is a level of ego involved. Now, I also need to be responsible for it. That's what marketing is nowadays.
Yeah.
Who's going to know about me? And then that becomes the ego not being out there, right? Because then I'm not making myself available to people to even know that I'm around, that I can serve them. But
this is an interesting double-edged sword, right?
It is.
It really is. Now you say that, I'm like, you're right.
The ego plays both games.
Yeah.
Right? It's either the ego's either whispering to us that we suck or the ego's telling us how awesome we are.
There's not a lot of middle ground there.
No. So you have to know when the ego's showing up in every scenario, just being in tune with it and be like, oh, there's the ego. A good example of that is my wife and I have a game with the ego now. So my wife, she does naturopathic medicine. She needs it. Balance hormones and stuff like that.
Awesome.
When she's not balanced, testosterone for her specifically is really low. So when she's not balanced, we know she doesn't sleep well. She doesn't feel well. I think you said something on your stuff the other day about this. Anyway, so it's really important, and it's important to our marriage because when her balances are off, the ego's more prevalent because there's an imbalance in the mind. Right. And so the other day, but it's never easy to talk about. Like when I'm noticing that she's low, I'm just like, okay, how do I approach this?
Have you had your levels tested recently?
Yeah, right. Like, how do I approach this without making her feel like I'm attacking her? Because I know it's not her that'll feel attacked. It's the ego that's going to be back there going, oh,
safe
come
word. Just come up with a safe word.
Right. She has one for me. I don't know why I don't have one for her.
So just so you know, the safe word on this show is cinnamon.
Yeah.
That's your safe word.
I try to bring it in as much as possible.
He loves the safe word,
That's
apparently.
awesome.
I think
he likes to tell everyone.
I think every podcast should have a safe word.
That's awesome. Cinnamon. Okay. That's funny.
If someone says cinnamon, we just change topics.
Anyway,
yeah,
cinnamon.
That's awesome. Cinnamon. So the other day I say, listen, it's really time. And the naturopathic medicine she's on, it's not here in Vegas, which blows my mind. It's not in St. George, Utah, where we're from. She has to fly to Mesa just to get the medicine that she needs. That's biotin is what this particular one uses called. I can't believe it's not here in Vegas, but anyway, the doctor did some searching.
Could be a business opportunity.
Yeah, seriously, especially in small towns where a lot of my clients are from small towns and there's no access to this. The naturopathic medicine in small towns is like, what?
They're like, what is that?
Yeah.
Say that again?
Yeah, it's so crazy.
What? No, because I talk about it on my page and stuff, and they're like, what is that again? Like, how is that different than other? And I'm like,
isn't that just eating a lot of salads?
Right? Isn't that crazy that it's so unknown? So anyway, I'm like, it's you got to go. Like things are not working. It's, you're not healthy. I know you're not feeling well. It's just time to go. And like, I could feel the tension. Like I'm driving and I can just feel this like energy coming over here, but I know it's not her. The old me would have been offended and my ego would have been like flexing against her ego without any words even being spoken.
Then you guys start.
Yeah. And then of course the evening is going to end up being in a fight. And so instead I said, so what's your ego saying right now? Because we've had this conversation, right? And she goes, don't tell me what to do. And I'm like, she's such a bitch, isn't she? Right? And made lighthearted of it, like acknowledging that it's not her. Like when she's balanced, she too would be upset with these feelings and how the energy is. So not making it about her, like she's not wrong. And so I said, and she goes, yeah, she's such a bitch. And I was like, cool. Okay. So we covered a lot of ground in discovering that together. Like if we speak about that way of being as a third person, which is what it is, it's the unconscious mind that's just running wild with all these thoughts, then it's not a personal attack on anybody. And it's really not, so.
So here's my personal question on this one.
Mm-hmm.
Did you give your egos names?
Not yet, but I listened to an Ed Milet podcast, and he interviewed somebody that works, I wish I could remember his name, on Dr. Phil's show, and they draw pictures based off of who their higher self is and their lower self.
Oh, interesting.
It's really cool. And so I've been thinking I'm gonna do that. So yeah, my ego doesn't have a name yet, but I'm gonna name him.
I mean, we name our penises. We should name our egos, right?
Well, yes, I'll just say yes. I don't think I've named my penis.
No, I haven't. I don't know which camera I'm talking to, but I've heard that people do this.
Oh, got it. Okay, good save.
I've heard.
What was it? How to Lose a Guy in 10 Days.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Oh, yeah.
Like she names the dog like Kroll the Warrior King, and then she names his penis like Fluffy or something like that.
That's also a good movie.
That's funny. It is a good movie. So
I love that one.
So just, seeing things like that, learning a lot about the ego too, and really understanding how that plays into it. A lot of my clients, anybody I ever work with, the conversation is going to be around past trauma. That's where it has to go. Mm-hmm. Because our way of being is set up from a past set of beliefs about ourselves through experiences we've had, major impacts that leave an imprint on the mind. That's how it works, right? And so unless we clean that up or create new meaning around what happened, we're not going to get anywhere. So, weight loss has nothing to do with diet and exercise. Yes, those are actions that should be taken to help that. But weight loss will never happen, or you can lose weight, but it'll come right back as soon as you lose that accountability with a coach or a gym or whatever. Mm-hmm. You'll bring it right back. That's why there's a 97% failure rate for those who lose it, because they didn't handle the initial trauma that caused them to put it on the first place. So when I get a new client, we start talking right off the bat, like, okay, have you ever experienced any trauma in the past that you haven't spoken about or cleaned up? And they're like, oh shit, here we go.
So like, I came here to do push-ups.
Yeah. Well, if we think about that, like talking more about mindset and past traumas, that's so much less sexy than like, what's the new diet? What's the new type of workout? I mean, it's different. Yeah. And people need to address that to really make radical changes in their life, like physically, emotionally, everything. Yeah. And you get it. And that's amazing that you address that with your people. That's so good.
And we've talked about this a couple of times on our podcast, but the failure of the health and wellness industry is this. It's like, buy my book on this diet, try this workout platform. It's like, no, like fix the shit that led to this problem. And then everything else is easy after that.
Yeah. Because the fact is they all work. Mm-hmm. Almost every one of those diets out there, you will lose weight or whatever training program you're on, depending on what you want your physique to look like, it'll work. Yeah. But the problem is the sustainability of it when it's over, right? That's the issue. And so, and it's not just trauma, it's also learning distinctions that we should be taught, frankly, in high school about life. Things like imposter syndrome and fear and vulnerability and these things that really, without knowing the full depth of how they affect our life or when things come our way, the way we relate to them, or how we're going to act inside of those ways of being, that's what makes the difference in the long run for people to transform and to be able to keep it off. Or and it's the beautiful thing about this kind of work is it's not even just weight loss. If you're having an issue in a relationship, same conversation, by the way, right? If you're having...
What's your ego saying?
Yeah. What's the ego saying? Always. If you're having an issue with finances, it's something to do with the distinction of life where money either you don't have the respect of the money that came from some past experience, or your parents said money doesn't grow on trees. And so that imprinted in your brain, and now money doesn't grow on trees. So, or
scarcity.
There's scarcity. Yeah, right. So it all wraps around that. And anything anybody's stuck with can be handled through discussing where the trauma came from that made you mean something. And that's where our way of being comes from. When, do you guys know what strong suit is? Have you ever heard that phrase?
Mm-hmm. No, so, I haven't.
If you're OCD or fiercely independent, or, if you're ever in that's just who I am. That's a strong suit. Strong suit comes from a past traumatic experience, usually around 5 to 7 years old, the earliest memory you have, something happened, and you had to create a meaning about that, right? So as an example, mine is I was 5 years old and I got ran over by a truck.
Jesus.
Yeah. So we were delivering wedding invitations, and it was my soon-to-be uncle who ran me over. Welcome to the family. Poor guy. I feel pretty bad for him,
Jeez.
So not only do you get run over by a truck, but it's delivering wedding invitations.
Yeah. For his wedding.
How do you feel about weddings now?
Yeah. Right. Fortunately, that wasn't part of the trauma.
Right.
So I get ran over. I'm laying in the hospital, and they're scrubbing me out. And at 5, concept of time isn't really understandable, right? So my parents weren't there. And so I felt like they weren't coming. And so in my 5-year-old mind, I'm alone. I'm terrified. So I don't need you. I'm going to be fine on my own. Fiercely independent. That's where it first imprinted.
And that would imprint, right?
Yep. So I had to make something mean something. Now, here's the deal about...
And that's your survival mechanism.
Survival mechanism, yeah. Because trauma, your brain is like, we got you, bro. You don't need to be traumatized. Here's what we're going to make this mean so we can handle it. But now it wants to collect evidence to make sure the ego wants to know that it's correct.
Has to validate
itself. Has to validate it, yeah. So, and the truth is my parents were probably there within 10 minutes. Like, later on, I was telling this story a few years ago. My mom was like, "What are you talking about?" Like, I literally remembered they weren't there.
Wow.
And my mom's like, "We were there like within 10 minutes."
It's like we blew through 12 red lights to get there.
Yeah. So I don't need you. I'm going to do it my way. Fast forward, I'm 8. I'm walking down the dirt road of my family's ranch, and I'm with my 2 older cousins, feeling like a cool kid because I'm the little kid with the older boys. They turn around, throw rocks at me, tell me go home. We don't want you here. Ego's like, got you, bro.
Fine, I don't need you.
We don't need you. We're going to do it our way. Here's what I was going to say, though. It is a direct opposite of what's needed or wanted. I needed to have somebody need me. I wanted to be wanted, right? And I wasn't getting it. So we're going to make it mean something so we can protect ourselves, protect our vulnerability. And so, and then 16, I run away. I'm living out of my truck. I would leave my wife's house when her dad's like, you need to go. It's too late. Go home. I would leave, go crawl in the back of her car and sleep. Like 16, 17 years old. My parents were great, but I don't need anybody. I'm good on my own. Then I get married. Don't need you. I'm good on my own. So anytime we're fighting, that's what the dialogue is, right? And you can start tracing in your own life a traumatic experience and how you're continuing to collect evidence. And until you can see it and confront it and then realize that that was just a strong suit that's made up, you'll always be a slave to it. You won't even know you're reacting that way. It's an automatic reaction. Now, I wanted somebody who was clingy. I didn't marry a clingy woman. And so then I'm feeling threatened the whole time, right? That's why it was always there. I don't need you anyway, but was totally opposite. And I didn't know it, and I didn't know how to articulate it. And so there was a lot of contention in my marriage. I tell people, we've been married 16 years, 14 sucked. Seriously. We're only married because I was afraid of somebody else raising my kids. That was it. Just out of fear. And then the last 2.
Which is another strong suit.
Yeah. Yeah. And then the last 2 have been incredible, like unbelievable, going through a lot of transformation stuff of myself. I've been doing this for a while, but it takes, it's peeling back the layers. So only in the last 2 has things really started carrying momentum because I've been committed to the practice.
How long would you say that you've been working on this practice?
2014.
Okay.
Yeah. In 2013 in November, I sat down in my gym with Steve Hardison. If you look him up, ultimate coach, this guy's world-renowned for some of the highest level CEOs in the world. Just phenomenal guy. Just happened to find my gym. And so I sat him down and I said, listen, I can't afford you, but I can't stand this woman. I freaking hate her. And I don't care if I could plug her into a computer and upload all of the best software. She's a porn star in the bedroom, the most proper woman in the streets or whatever. What's that song? There's a rap song. I can't remember.
Freaking the lady in the streets freaking.
Yeah, that one. Like, that's what was going through my head. Like, if I could upload that, I still don't want to be with her. So what's wrong with me? And I don't know what caused me to think that.
I love that you said that.
Yeah.
I've had a lot of conversations with some people lately, and this is a message I want to reiterate, is that how often do we pass the blame onto someone else instead of saying, what's wrong with me?
Yeah. Yeah. And I don't know why in the moment that was there, but I'm so grateful that I could see that. And I told him, so what's wrong with me that if I could have the perfect version of her, that I don't want to be with her? Because that's clearly not her problem anymore. Now it's something with me. And he said, go to Landmark Forum. And I had seen the Landmark Forum a year prior, and I'm like, I don't believe in this touchy-feely bullshit. I mean, I'm a wildland firefighter, a roughneck on the oil fields, a combat veteran, and now a CrossFit gym owner. Like, getting in touch with my mental, emotional side was like, please, come on.
What is Landmark 40?
Oh. Landmark Forum. Yeah.
Forum.
You would love it. On this journey you're on, you would love it. So it's a 3-day self-development seminar.
Okay.
There's almost no other program on the planet that's good. Matter of fact, Steve charges $250,000 a year for 100 hours up front.
Wow.
That's his fee, because the people he's coaching, they make millions, and if they're not invested, they're not going to, So in the coaching world, money doesn't make sense, right? Because
it's arbitrary.
Yeah, because you're like, wow, you think you're worth $7,000 an hour, or whatever that ends up being. Well, no, it's got nothing to do with that. It's that if the person isn't invested, they're not going to change, right? So that's,
and the person that I'm coaching makes $40,000 an hour.
Yeah, right. Yeah, exactly. So I'm like, I don't believe in that crap. But I made a promise to myself when I discovered who this new guy in my gym was, that whatever he tells me, I'm going to do it. And so he said, go to the Landmark Forum. And I had seen it a year earlier, and I was like, oh, crap. Okay, I'll go. And I did. And that's when it shifted. It was January 2014. I went to the Landmark Forum, and that was my first introduction to self-development. And then from there, it's just been taking on one thing after the other. I got to work with Steve under a special circumstance for a little while, and that was another massive leap forward that I think was a shortcut for me that most people don't get because of who he was and how he occurred for me, So at that point with Steve, I was willing to tell my ego that you have no say here. Even before I knew what the ego was, it was like, whatever comes up here, I'm going to ignore it if he says something different. So, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's pretty crazy.
Your head looks like it's going to explode.
I mean, I love this stuff, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I think that so many people need to focus on the deep stuff that we're almost like running away from and like don't want to face. But I think once you do, and once you really sit down with yourself and think about stuff that you don't want to think about or face or whatever, I mean, that's where all the leaps that's where you get all the leaps and all the changes. I mean, that's where it happens.
Yep. That's right.
And you're right. Like, it's not all about weight loss and what you look like. I mean, it all starts in your mind, and there are things holding all of us back. And we got to work on that to move forward. Yeah. I mean, I know you agree, Evan.
I do. And I was thinking about that. There was that great book. It was Come As You Are. And it was, it's about women's sexuality. And there was a really interesting component on there. And it talks about women having we all have a sexual accelerator and a sexual brake. And certain things are triggers for certain things, right? So, it really in context of sexual health, there's this, you might be in the right setting. There might be, like Barry White's playing, the candles are going, all of that. Yeah. But for whatever reason, there's a trigger that just hits the brakes. And I think that that's so true, not just in sexual health, but in mental health. Yeah. It's what are these strong suits? What are these things that we think we're doing so many things healthy, but all we're doing is slamming on the brakes to our own personal development, even though we think that we're actually revving the gas. Yeah. And so the onus is on us most of the time to admit, I don't have a freaking clue what I'm doing. Yeah. And, it clearly there's a pattern. It's not working. It's the same thing time and time again. It's doing the same thing again and again, expecting a different result. And then looking at some of these resources to actually grow beyond where we're at. Yeah. Yeah. There's lots of resources. We talked about a couple at Spartan Race. I mean, more information is going to be coming out about different things like that are used to be esoteric, but now they're mainstream. Yeah. 60 Minutes just did a piece on psychedelics 2 days ago, and I've been sort of expressing my interest in that with some of my clients on a very careful level, because you never know who you're working with. But then one of them messaged me and said, "Oh my gosh, did you see 60 Minutes?" Right now that it's on 60 Minutes, it's mainstream, baby. Yeah, right. Really? And so it's like, oh, we can talk about it now, Or my coach isn't totally psycho because 60 Minutes said it. Like, when is Whole Foods going to start offering this? Yeah, I want a wheatgrass smoothie and an ayahuasca experience. Lion's mane. Psilocybin mushrooms, ayahuasca, DMT. Yeah, DMT. Here we go. That's the health. That's the health food store of the future. We've come up with 2 great business ideas here. Oh, you have naturopathic doctors getting. That's right. In Vegas, and then a supplement store for psychedelics. Well, here's the thing, right? Because and they do talk about this in How to Change Your Mind. Is that in the United States, ayahuasca is still protected as a religious practice. Yep. So you can do it in the United States legally, and of course, we're not sitting here
in the U.S. Really, I thought it wasn't.
No, it's
legal.
it's a religious practice in the U.S., so it is protected under First Amendment rights, basically.
Right.
Oh wow.
You have to do it under a church designation to prove that, but yes.
Gotcha.
But I think again, it's like, well, this is an interesting conversation. I want to see where this goes. So let's
cinnamon.
Like, not for me. I'm just kidding. I was trying to figure out how to segue into that one.
Yeah. Let's talk about tripping balls, okay?
Well,
and the benefits.
what I was going to ask is, I mean, so this was one of the things that when we first met, we kind of just dove right into this. So
it was literally like, "Hi, nice to meet you. Let's talk about ayahuasca."
Right. It was kind of like this thing that just popped up there. But obviously, it's not for everyone.
Right.
I don't think everyone should do it, but I would love to hear your experience as far as like, was that a really huge help in your life and your development? I mean,
yes. Yeah.
I don't know. I kind of want you to elaborate on that too, because I also feel like it can be very beneficial for people, not everyone. And there's this saying, it's like, if you think you're ready to do ayahuasca, you're correct. And if you think you're not ready, then you're also correct.
Yep.
Kind of thing.
Yeah,
and so,
absolutely.
Yeah, I would just love to hear how you think it's benefited you.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think to start, I should say that I think that where people get mixed up is set and setting. I've met so many people who have experienced magic mushrooms or DMT or MDMA in party settings in their youth. And they're like, "Oh, I did mushrooms and that didn't do anything for me."
Right.
Where were you? At a party? Oh, of course not.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, you wasted the intention of this medicine. So set is your mindset, what your intentions are when you're going into these sacred plants. That's what they are. They should be considered sacred plants. The intentions and the setting is where you're doing these at, right? And what's the environment that's creating that energy. So that's very important for anybody considering it, and you should find somebody who's experienced it before that can maybe guide you. And for the sake of liability, we do not condone or suggest this for anybody, and you should find a professional.
Yeah.
But anyway.
Hashtag lawyer speak.
None of which I've done. So so I've experienced, and I was fairly new I was new, period, until about 3 years ago. My first ayahuasca experience, and I did a ceremony I did 3 nights of ceremony. And during the day, I did 2 combo sapo sessions. And when this is over, I'll have to show you the picture of my frog face. You guys?
Oh, no, you talked about it.
This is like the frog medicine. Where it's like, is it the poisons from the frog that you put on your skin?
Yeah, so they excrete it off the back of the frog because it's threatened, and that's how it gets animals to let them go.
Right.
But it actually has a very powerful medicinal benefit to it as well.
And then they burn your skin, right?
Yeah, so I've got 8 burn marks that you can vaguely see right here from past ceremonies, and then some right here. But because it's got to get that sub-layer of the epidermis so that it can go inside and activate. But anyway, so we did that, and then we did Wim Hof at the same time. And it was a
Holy cow.
Yeah, it was a very intense weekend. Having never done any of this before and going right into that, I was like, what are you doing to me?
I could literally only imagine what that would be like.
It was crazy. It was intense.
Wow.
Yeah. So with my ayahuasca experience, my first night was a nightmare. Like literally, I was the guy. If you YouTube it and you see somebody like screaming and begging for mercy, that was me.
Yeah.
And there was 15 people in there, and when it was over, they're like, "Are you okay?" And I just said, "I don't know." And I was serious.
And I think that's important for people to know too. That going into these things, these aren't like enjoyable experiences. Like this is not something you're like, oh, this is gonna feel great and I'm gonna feel amazing after.
It's not ecstasy at a rave.
No.
At all.
It can be a beautiful experience that was also tremendously difficult.
Yes. Yeah. And some people have only beautiful experiences. Here's the thing about these medicines. They tell you what you need to experience. You don't get to choose, right?
Correct.
Like what I experienced, I had no idea what was coming. Matter of fact, I was there thinking I was going to get insights in how to be a better businessman, how to be more successful. Nope. Now, having a good relationship at home does help that, but so it was just 180 degrees of what I thought I was going to get. So anyway, my first night, all I remember is blackness, lots of purging. I literally purged all night long, begging for mercy, audibly, please stop, please help. Make it stop, like just rolling around on the ground.
Again, this is not an enjoyable experience.
No. And that was the first night. So then I was really nervous the second night.
Naturally. Yeah.
And I went in the second night into ceremony. And it was uncomfortable. And I think that was the ego, really. Ego was like, it knew it was dying. that I was taking it out, and my ego was so strong up to that point that it was really resistant. So it was in my head trying to play all these kind of mind games to not participate, to try to force it out. But that's the beautiful thing about plant medicine, is that if you're somebody who's got a strong ego or very intelligent and can't seem to break through your own BS, plant medicine is something you really should consider, because it doesn't give you a choice. It's like you're in it and you just gave up all control, and now you're going to see yourself for what you are. And that can be very confronting. Some people I've told that to, and they're like, oh shit, I don't want to do that. Like, they know they've got some stuff to clean up, and they don't dare face it.
Right.
You know? So anyway, so I go 3 nights of ceremony, and then and I don't remember anything. I saw some visuals, some Amazonian architect, artwork, and some anacondas that were circling the top of the yurt that were peaceful. Snakes are peaceful, which was a new experience. Like, there was no fear with these snakes.
Are you originally afraid of snakes?
No, but in theology, they're the sign of the devil.
Yeah,
and yet it's this loving, peaceful creature guiding you. And
well, that's funny. Like, you talk about the difference between Christian, Christian backgrounds versus the Peruvian. Yeah. And we just got back from 10 days in Peru, so you look at just the very contrasting differences in their symbology versus ours.
Right.
Yeah,
it's interesting. So
she's a puma, by the way.
A puma. Oh, really? That's what. Yeah.
I got to choose, and I like the cat. Okay.
Nice. Perfect. That's awesome.
Wow.
Yeah. Cinnamon. That's it. So I don't remember an impact of that, that I could take with me until the next week, and I'm literally driving down the road, and I just get this whole vision just popped in. And it was me. I became my wife, and I experienced me in a situation that she can't stand, which is I'm an omega. Have you ever heard the term an omega? Like, I can be an alpha if I'm with betas, and I can be a beta if I'm with alphas, as long as the mission gets accomplished. If I'm with a whole bunch of alpha type people, I'll just get quiet and just go for it.
You get the job done.
Whatever it takes to get the job done, or to enjoy my time. I don't need to posture. I don't need to try to lead.
But you can be a natural born leader.
But I'm a leader. If I'm with a bunch of betas that are lacking direction and things need to be taken care of right away, or if alphas get too much of their ego in the way and somebody needs to step in.
So an omega is like in the middle.
A middle, yeah.
Okay,
we
cool.
can play any.
I think I'm that too, maybe.
Yeah, a lot of people are, and they don't realize
Yeah.
it. That was huge for me to learn, because I always felt like a little lost, lost or less than.
You're not all the way down there, and you're not an alpha. So it's like, okay, there's something there, but
okay, so hold on one quick second. We got someone at the door.
Oh,
we'll cover this in post.
Perfect.
Then we are back.
So we were talking about alphas and omegas,
Yeah.
and you.
Yeah.
So you became your wife.
So I became my wife, and one of the things that I will do is talk my way into it until I get it. And I'll just circle and circle and circle until she's finally like, fine, whatever you want to do, I don't care, right? And totally unaware of the way I'm occurring for her in that scenario. So when I became her, which, by the way, when you are in a ceremony for ayahuasca, my experience is that you feel everything as if it's real, and it's not. Like, in my mind, I was just in this yurt taking medicine with a bunch of people, and I knew it wasn't. I knew that there wasn't actually snakes circling the top of this yurt, and everything I was experiencing emotionally was totally real, right? So it's this weird between two worlds type experience.
So this is interesting, because this is after the ceremony. You're just driving.
Yeah,
and
I'm
all
driving.
of a sudden this hit you.
Almost a full week later, and I was like, just this whole flood of new information about myself. And I was like, so I called my wife and I said, hey, I just had this memory of my ceremony. And so this is what I experienced. I became you, and I was dealing with me as you while I was trying to get you, and I was trying to get me to agree to something. And I felt like I had no purpose. I have no value in this relationship. So why even bother? And I'm almost like invisible. Like, there's really no value here. And she goes, yeah, welcome to my life.
Wow.
I was like, you will never have to experience that guy again. Like, once you feel something to that level, it's not like...
You can't unfeel it.
No, and we've had conversations. That's the thing. We've had conversations, and conceptually, I'm like, yeah, that sucks. Conceptually. You tell me what how bad you hate it. It's like, okay, I'm sorry, and then I do it again because I've never felt it, and it's hard to see. My ego is really, really strong. And my identity, right? And so when I felt it, I was like, shit, like that's abuse. Like there's a level of abuse there and I never saw myself as an abusive person, but there certainly is. That's an emotional abuse. Like she doesn't want to end a marriage because, that's almost something that would be like, really, that's it? You got divorced for that, and there's all this stuff going on, but yet that's a heavy burden. Mm-hmm. And so I wouldn't blame her if I kept going that way for so long. And so I was like, yeah, I'm sorry. You're just never going to have to experience that again, because now I know what that feels like,
Wow.
And so we have a safe word too, and it's omega.
Mm.
So if I'm being in that way, she'll say omega, and I'm like, oh crap. So I'll back off and just totally take a huge step back and say, okay, do I really need this?
Wow.
How many times after that experience has she had to use that safe word?
She hasn't used it once.
Wow.
That's awesome.
But see, this is why it's so fascinating, because a lot of people think of these plant medicines as a drug, but it is truly a medicine.
Yeah.
And just like that, like it was able to help you see exactly from her side and really just transform that area for both of you guys.
Yeah. It's amazing.
And I love hearing these stories because they're like, oh, like, haha, doing drugs in the Amazon, right? Like, what, like, cool, like, all right, hippie or whatever.
Yeah,
and it's like, okay, I see what you mean by that, but it truly can be a medicine, or it is a medicine.
Yeah.
Like it can seriously help people.
Well, and that's the thing. It was a medicine, right? So, and you'll get into this and that, how to change your mind as you read that. That's how it started as that. And you look at the success rates for things like, getting people to stop smoking or heroin or opioids.
Oh, right.
Like,
addiction.
Nothing has ever come close to the success that they've had with set and setting, obviously being the appropriate catalyst for that. And then, the whole Timothy Leary counterculture thing became, it's a drug. But it's like, no, this is a medicine. And when we actually look at it as such and give it its proper respect in the context of medicine, what are we not doing to elevate the collective consciousness by continuing to look at this as a drug?
Yeah, that's
and
right.
How are marriage therapy, right? Like how many marriages could be saved by, that omega type of person saying like, holy shit, I've been this person our entire marriage. I didn't realize that.
Yep.
I'll never do that again.
Yeah. Speaking of marriage therapy, another thing my wife and I experienced together for the first time a few months ago was MDMA. Set and setting. Set and setting. We set we went somewhere, so we were alone. We'd have to deal with it. Man, the first time we did that, we looked at each other and we're like, okay, every couple should experience this together one time.
And that was originally a couples therapy drug.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And so like it was so profound the way it brought us together, and you could talk about whatever, and it was just like, oh, I totally, the empathy was just flowing.
Yeah.
And so there was no making each other wrong, and like it was unbelievable. And so, we've added that into a reoccurring cycle for ourselves because it's so impactful. Now you got to be careful your sources and that kind of stuff of where you're getting it, but that's the thing is there's pharmaceutical companies, they're the culprits. Like you can't say it enough, and it sounds like a conspiracy theorist, but they're the culprits because half this stuff they can't patent, protect, and sell. I'm working on a project right now. We're trying to go to Soltara in Costa Rica. We're working on raising funding for a documentary for veterans to get veterans to ayahuasca at Soltara Healing Center down there.
It's amazing.
So we want to put this in the show notes, but these are the things that we want our listeners to support, right? So, make sure that we get the information. So wherever it is, it's a GoFundMe. We want to make sure that our listeners are supporting this type
that would be amazing. Yeah. So that's... And that's where we're at, is because what we know is when we get veterans down there, this kind of medicine is what heals. Talk therapy doesn't go very far. So I had a battle buddy kill himself in 2012, and he was on opiates because they were prescribed to him when he blew his knee out. And so then it was a chain reaction from there. Recently, I have a podcast that's hosted on a page called Heroes Media Group. It's veterans doing podcasts to try to change the narrative. So right now, the narrative for veterans is we're broken, we have PTSD, you should be aware of us, and we're poor us.
Yeah.
Well,
here's some opioids.
Yeah, because that's the narrative, it's going to perpetuate itself. Some veteran somewhere only is dealing with depression or a lack of purpose, but because the narrative is PTSD, he thinks he has, or she thinks she has PTSD. All they actually need to do is get up, get moving, get the blood flowing, find a gym, get the endorphins flowing, and then find maybe plant medicine or then maybe some therapist, but not the opiates. So on Heroes Media, they just did an article about a month ago, and they traced the process of how veterans were given what's called a combat cocktail. It's 5 different prescriptions that turn them into zombies. And there's actually a belief that it's so they won't ask for benefits because they're zombified.
Wow.
And the people who did the research for the veterans to get OxyContin was Purdue. Purdue Pharma did the research to say that it worked so that they could then turn around and sell their product. So it wasn't even a third party. So this is...
that's creating a problem for your own solution.
Oh, totally. And then look what happens. They make billions of dollars and now they're being caught for it, right? So part of this mission... So the mission is certainly to heal veterans first. And then the other part of it is to get them away from pharmaceutical companies that are not, they're just feeding their own pockets. Because once you're on OxyContin, you're on OxyContin. Mm-hmm. It doesn't end. Where you can take ayahuasca and never do it again the rest of your life because that one ceremony might have been enough.
Yeah.
You're done. That's it.
And it's not addictive?
Not addictive, yeah. Psilocybin, evidence that it heals broken neural pathways in the brain. Well, when you heal a broken neural pathway and recreate one, you don't need anything else. You got it taken care of. It's done, you know?
I've even heard ayahuasca creates new brain cells too. Like wild stuff. I mean, this is natural.
Yeah.
Well, one of the things that I love about the science behind this is with the neural imaging, they talk about how when you actually look at a scan of someone who's done psilocybin, ayahuasca, LSD, that their brains look like that of an infant. So you start to see the world without construct. Yeah. And those constructs are the same thing. It's that narrative that oh, I've got PTSD. I need these drugs. It's like when you take that away, you reframe the entire path of your life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that neuroplasticity, they can be molded. And that's one of the beautiful things with that accompanied with... So I'm struggling with the concept of going and getting a degree. I don't want one because of what we talked about earlier. I don't want to be influenced by this. But I also would love to be a part of the upcoming generation of psychotherapists that use psychedelics for.
That's a really cool, fascinating.
Yes.
I want to know more about that too. I think that's so cool.
Yeah. So maps.org, they're at the forefront of getting it. They're part of why now Johns Hopkins is now doing research on phase 3 MDMA or psilocybin
I didn't
studies.
know that.
Oh, yeah.
Research that they halted 50 years ago, which was already in the can.
Yeah, totally.
We knew this shit worked back then.
Wow.
Yeah, but nobody wants to go to war when they're happy and complete with themselves. I mean, there's another theory. But anyway.
Every politician, ayahuasca now.
Yeah, seriously. Oh, man. So when you are with somebody like a coach or a therapist who is 100% interested in the betterment of yourself, our biggest challenge is breaking through the ego. So as a coach, every time I'm up against, the hardest thing I'm up against is the ego of the person I'm with, right? That's who I'm going to battle with. Not the person I'm talking to and looking at. It's that version of themselves, the voice in their head that's just constantly going on, making assessments a million miles an hour of every word coming out of my mouth. That's the person I'm going to war with to help the person sitting in front of me get that freedom. When you have somebody on a psychedelic medicine where that voice is like, get the hell out, and it has no say, it's put behind bars for that period of time, you can then help them create through that neuroplasticity, that flexibility of the mind. They're impressionable. It's dangerous, but with the right person, the right whoever's holding space and giving that guidance, you can that's why they say it's worth a year of therapy. One session of MDMA or psilocybin is worth an entire year of psychotherapy in one session. And the results, I saw a presentation, I can't remember where, but I think it was MAPS, where they broke down the statistics of how it's working. And there was evidence that even 6 months and a year later, continued progress from one experience.
Wow.
It's continuing to heal. Not just the one session and done. Neural pathways are still growing. It's crazy.
Just
Well,
phenomenal.
and you know, extrapolate that to, okay, you've got marital problems, you know,
Yep.
something like that. You're both doing it.
Yeah.
So now you've both put in that ego behind bars, and you're starting to create the relationship that you need to. Like,
Absolutely.
imagine the healing and the elevation that takes place with that.
Yeah,
and
totally.
you guys are experiencing this now in your own marriage.
Yeah, we are. My wife isn't into. She's open and willing to do the psilocybin because the purging process isn't there. She's not so sure.
With the ayahuasca.
Yeah, she's not so sure she's okay with the ayahuasca side. Because of the purging and the uncomfortableness that's there. But she's done microdose, a little bit more than a microdose level of psilocybin, and it was a really good experience for her. So she's mentioned she's open to like a hero dose, which is 4.5 to 5 grams, but hasn't experienced that yet. But I know that when it does, and for me, it's not about what I'm going to get from her out of that. It's just I want her to be complete. Because I've seen it happen for myself, and I'm like, oh my gosh. So when I watch her suffer from self-judgment or
pain, trauma, like anything,
things that don't really matter, it's your heart breaks for the people you love because you're like, man, if you would just experience this.
Right.
You know, you were saying something about people's judgments of this type of medicine, and I was talking to my mom, and she's like, well, how do you know it's not Satan likes to be sneaky and work his way in. You know, my mom, she's cute. She's very spiritual. So how do you know Satan's not like using these ways to get into your life? And at this time, my grandmother just passed away, and there's 10 kids, and she left a lot of land and wealth, and they are like ripping each other apart. And even before she passed away, they just didn't get along very well. And I'm like, Mom, like I'm talking to you about something that I'm telling you will heal the brokenness in your family. And your family is broken. How are you not seeing that Satan has already worked his way in? Like you guys hate each other. You're fighting all the time. And I'm telling you, if you do this, there will be love. And yet you're questioning it like it's Satan's way. I don't think that Satan works through love in the context she's, approaching it with. And she's like, oh, that's a good point. And I'm like, but you're right. They have to be ready. It's not for everybody, and it's for everybody. The only time it really is dangerous is if they have a history or a potential history of schizophrenia. But outside of that, I took a friend who is like a Howard Hughes, brilliant man, and because he's like Howard Hughes, Robin Williams, I mean the list can go on. They're so incredibly intelligent that conversation is just like, I get all that. Right? You just can't penetrate. And I was so grateful to be there because it was an ayahuasca ceremony. I watched him, I think probably for the first time, have a total moment of peace where his mind was just shut down. He needs a week experience to really make it stick, because as soon as we were done, it was right back to the world. I mean, he's a celebrity, so as soon as we were back on the plane, it was phone calls, emails, like right back in the real world. So the integration process didn't have an opportunity to set, but to see that moment where he came out of it and was like, is that what the collective conscience is? And I'm like, yeah, welcome, brother.
You saw a glimpse.
Yeah, you saw a glimpse. So yeah, ayahuasca. I've done a couple of ceremonies of magic mushrooms. Those are interesting. Every time I do those now, I get a real life lesson I can apply like almost right away.
With the mushrooms? With mushrooms,
okay. Yeah. I had a breakthrough in finances with mushrooms, which was interesting, and how that played out. I had a breakthrough in, I got to watch conversation unfolding, and I watched two people argue over God, and what they couldn't see was they agreed. Wow. But they were arguing about it, and so I'm like, wow. But I really got to see
peace in the Middle East.
Yeah. It was weird because I actually felt like I could see communication rather than communicate. I was seeing communication.
Well, how much of true communication is just energy?
Oh, it's all energy.
It's that vibrational connection.
Yeah. And what I experienced with communication was before I even knew about this term, epigenetics. Like I saw epigenetics. It was with Dwayne Johnson, the freaking Rock. Like I'm tripping on mushrooms and I'm watching this conference table, and at the end is the Rock, and there were two people on each side pitching him. But behind them was their genealogy. And I knew it because of the era of the clothing they were wearing. So behind this guy was a bunch of people that were like ghosts in old clothing, and behind this guy was a bunch. And when they were talking to him, they were pitching him from a place of their own fears, worries, and desires. And what they missed was behind Dwayne was the same thing. So in order to communicate clearly, you have to put yours aside, your fears, worries, and doubts, and speak to that other person. What is their desires? What are they trying to create? How can you be a part of their goal, right? Because as a business person or as somebody you want to do work with, they're not going to switch their whole focus to go and work on yours. But if what you're doing can relate, then they'll be connected. So that was interesting.
Well, that's one of the greatest things that I've ever heard when it comes to communication is God, Buddha, Brahma, whoever.
Yeah.
He gave you 2 ears and 1 mouth so you can listen twice as much as you speak.
Oh, I like that. That's
like
cool.
If you really think about that when it comes to communication, and, we don't just wait for our turn to talk, but, actually listen and feel what the other person is going to say. Like, that's how true communication happens.
Yeah. Dang, that's awesome. I have a question for you.
For me?
Yes.
Okay.
Is that okay?
Reverse interview.
Sure.
Yeah,
okay.
Nice.
So, a couple of years ago, I was observing a friend of mine, Brooke Entz, her social media, and just the level of conversation and BS that gets spoken to people who have a level of influence, right?
Yeah.
And you have a great following, a big following. And I see your posts and I see some of the comments that are on there, and I'm just like, geez. So here's where I'm going to my question. The level of growth that you've had to accomplish in being confident in yourself, because you put something on there and you're going to have a million comments that are not always positive. What's your growth been like? What's that experience been like to go from who you were prior to that exposure, right? How did you overcome that? What's that been like to get to where you are now? And what was it like when it was tough and like those first few comments, as you're growing and getting like, oh my gosh, people are assholes. Like,
yeah,
I'm curious. What that's like.
I think with anyone who puts themselves out there and you're going to get it. Like you're going to get kickback. You're going to get positivity too. I get more love than I get hate. So that's honestly what I focus on.
Great.
But I will say, just now that I've grown up and my eyes are a little bit more open, I think, I just don't take things personally now. I just know that, like we've said this before on other podcasts, but hurt people. And there have been times when I've gotten comments or messages and people are just ripping me a new one. And there are times when I've replied, but I'm like, hey, I understand your point. I mean, I don't believe it's all correct or whatever, but, thank you for sharing, whatever. And they're like, oh my God, you responded. Like, I only said that because I didn't think you were going to see it. And I'm like, what the fuck?
That's a weird way to get attention.
Excuse me?
Yeah.
And I'm like, this person is saying or lashing out at me or whatever, but it's like, they also just said it because they didn't think I would read it either. And it's like, you're just putting so much negative energy. I really try not to put anything that's not going to support me or help me to grow or feel supported or whatever. Like, why would I give that energy?
Yeah.
Like, I don't want to waste my time on that. I mean, if I had a following when I was younger, I'm sure it would affect me a lot more and I would take a lot more personally. But just growing up, I just know what's true. And like, I still love myself no matter what. And I think that's, I don't waste time. Like dwelling on. Yeah.
I want to jump in on this one because I think we've talked a lot about the 4 agreements.
Oh yeah. That's a great book.
I think one of the things that you've instinctually done, whether you've read that book or not, is you're always impeccable with your word. You're consistent in everything that you post. You're authentic. You just tell it like it is. And, there's a lot of social media influencers out there that might work with brands and they're like, here's a picture of me in a bikini with, whatever. Like you do your research, you get on a platform, informed, well-articulated, you know what you want to say, and you stand behind that. And so that first agreement of being impeccable with your word is what you bring to the social media equation. And then I think you've also gotten to the point where you just don't take anything personally. And because of that, one of the things that I've noticed in your social is that you don't have to defend yourself. Because you have those followers that when some asshat says something super, it's like you get those people who are like you.
I sit back and watch.
Your people
someone
rally.
says something, I don't even say anything. All of a sudden, like the comments on that one person's comment is like exploding, and they're just going at them and supporting me. I'm like, oh my God, I've built this like community, and they, most of them are obviously supportive and stuff like that. But I think what's been interesting too is like I'm on such a quest for personal development and self-improvement in a lot of ways. And it's funny because, social media is such a fake world and I'm so much more about the real right now. And so I feel a little disconnected from it, honestly. So, I mean, it's part of my business. It's like, it's what I do. It's there. Like, I'm not just going to delete my account just because, but like, you know, I'm trying to find ways to integrate a lot of what I've learned and like my truth and my realness into such a fake world. And, for the most part, I think it's being received well from people, but it's such an interesting world. Like, I actually used to be a pharmaceutical rep before I got into what I'm doing now. I used to work in the pharmaceutical industry and
giving people boners.
My drug was Cialis. That's why he says that.
Yeah, I figured as soon as he said that, I was like, okay.
We have to clarify why
cinnamon.
Cinnamon. That's what I was going to say. Where's the cinnamon? Got it. Okay.
So
I forgot to connect those dots.
It's important for people to know that part. You can just say that.
God, yeah, sorry. It's
yeah, but when you take that little clip out for promoting the podcast, that's what's going to get the clicks.
Oh yeah,
right. It's a good point. Actually,
the title of this podcast is Ayahuasca and Janna giving people boners.
It's going to be the #1 downloaded podcast.
Top 10 Apple.
Man, I've already lost my train of thought, but you know, social media is such an interesting industry. And when I started my page, when I started growing, that wasn't my goal. I had some health issues in the past. I was using social media as like an online journal to share my stuff. And then I guess people connected with it and liked it, and it started growing. And I'm like, okay, well now everyone's asking me questions about health and nutrition. Even though I wasn't certified in anything, I just was doing my own research and reading.
Yeah.
And so I was like, well, now I feel responsible. Like I want to know more about fitness, nutrition, lifestyle, mindset, all these things for myself. But it also makes sense for me to know these things because I get so many questions all day, and I'm trying to help people too.
Well, and that's back to your point about do you need the 3 letters after your name? Because you guys have, and I think we've all to a certain extent, is we've got a PhD in life. Mm-hmm. And that experience is why people seek out the answers that we have, not because we sit in in front of a lectern all day and tell people theoretical information from a book. It's when you want to look like, when you're after a certain body, like, well, let's go after ask the questions of the person who's got the body we want.
Yeah.
I'm pointing to him, not to you.
Well, he's
dead sexy.
No. I tell people, listen, the only difference between me and you is 5 years of practice. In this way of being. That's it. I'm not special. I'm special. I tell myself I'm special, but I'm not special.
Right.
I discovered a way of being, and I started practicing. And now I'm sharing that with you. And you'll be right where I'm at today if you practice. As a matter of fact, you can shorten that 5 years depending on the level of the intention, because there was a space in the 5 years where, this is me. I grow a little and then I let it fall, and I grow a little and let it fall. And if you just go all in, you can even pass me. There's no set time limit to how long it's going to take to get there. It's your intention into discovering yourself and your ego and this way of being. That's it. The difference between me and my coach, a couple of decades. That's it. They didn't start out all of a sudden out of the gate of college or whatever, and they can speak to people. It's life experiences, like you were mentioning earlier. That's what got you there, and then being willing to keep showing up. You get knocked down 8, get up 9.
That's it, right? And it's we become such a quick fix world. What pill can I take to solve all of my psyche issues?
Yep.
And you can't.
No.
The real work is what we're talking about here,
Yeah.
and maybe that begins with plant medicine, but it certainly begins with killing your fucking ego.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's right.
Totally.
So was there
That's the other title for this. Killing your fucking ego.
Yeah. That's a good title. Was there a moment though where you were like the comments were bothering you, and then you had that turning point? Is there a point you can point to when that happened?
I wouldn't say there was like one specific situation. I mean, I'm a lot more resilient now just in general, I think. So that's just helped, I think, in every way of my life. But yeah, I mean, people are mean, hurt people, and I understand that. Going through my own experiences in life, like with my ayahuasca experience, like there's a lot of things I understood about the world and myself and other people and everything. And I'm a much more understanding person. And,
I love how she just snuck that in, right? Like,
what do you mean?
My ayahuasca experience.
Well,
you actually haven't publicly said that.
I know. I actually haven't.
You told me that in Spartan race, and so I was like, "Is this when it's happening?"
I feel like that's going to have to be a whole nother.
Oh, absolutely.
There's a lot there. There's a lot there, but I mean, it's.
What's funny is everybody's going to go,
Right.
And yet they've been following you since the experience with no inclination, right? People, I think they think that once you do it, you're just different or weird or whatever, but same person, just more awareness.
When I posted that I was going to Peru, I had a few people sent me like personal messages saying, "Are you going to do ayahuasca?"
Yeah.
And I was like, well, I have that option and I think I'm planning on it. I'm still really fucking nervous and scared, but the plan is I think so. And I think I'm ready for that.
I really can't wait for you to discuss that experience.
Yeah. Yeah. And you know, we told you a little bit more about that, AJ, and we've all had unique experiences and stuff, but it's pretty, I mean,
that'll be a special show.
Yeah. I didn't think I had like much healing or things to work through until I did that. And I was like,
if only the listeners could see the look on my face right now.
You know, not for everyone, but it can be for everyone at the same time. So I don't know. It's interesting.
Cool.
But
awesome.
Thank you for asking. I mean,
yeah. Thanks for sharing. I was talking about it with my wife and I said, you know, unless you reach that level of exposure, you'll never know what it's like to grow through that. Like, you know, sometimes I'll think about posting something and I'll second guess it because of the people I know that are following me and how it's going to impact them.
Right.
Usually it's family, right?
Of course.
And then I usually post it anyway because that's the exact reason to post it.
Right.
But I take a minute and I question that. I was like, geez. And so then I think about people that have such a much larger, and I was like, wow, they know if they post it, they're going to get a lot more interaction than I will. So what they have experienced to grow through that, to not worry and let others' opinions of them make that difference, that's an incredible opportunity.
Totally.
Of growth, yeah.
This becomes the challenge with social media, right? Because we talk in this circle about really being authentic, showing up as your authentic self, killing the ego. But the caveat is always the but. How much can I post and still feel like you want to be authentic, but do I have to pull back a little bit?
Yeah.
You know, I want to be completely transparent and completely honest, but can I say this without hurting someone else?
Yeah. Totally. I mean, there's always that dance. I mean,
there's always that dance. And I don't know. I think the collective consciousness that we talk about, like our next stage of human evolution is our ability to kill that ego to the point where we can say things and not have to be afraid of being completely honest and vulnerable.
Right. Yep. I agree. That's amazing.
It's crazy.
And that's my journey. I mean, like you guys have heard mine, but it's, you know, that's been my journey is going from that place where it's like you had to be, you know, my strong suit, very similar to yours is, you know, I was kidnapped when I was 3, you know, I was gone for 6 months. I'm like, that was my thing. And so like those defense mechanisms, those survival mechanisms carried me forward for a long part of my life. And it's been a challenge, and it's still the challenge, like every single day, to not fall back into those patterns that your ego's like, hey, that was safe. Let's go back there. Right? Like, cause this is uncomfortable over here. The work that you're doing is not easy. It's hard. It's uncomfortable. Let's go back over here. That was easy. Like,
that's how you grow.
That's right. The ego only wants what it's familiar with, even if you're miserable where you're at, because, you know, the devil you know is better than the devil you don't. And that's really what it comes down to. What's on the other side could be the most incredible breakthrough of your life, and all the pieces fall into place. Maybe you've been doing all of this work, and that's the only thing that's missing is the awareness of the ego and its impact, right? Or this, maybe it's just one thing you're working on transforming. But until you're willing to step into that boldly with courage and vulnerability, because that's what it's going to take to have the courage, you're just not going to know it. And the ego just doesn't want to do what's not familiar, period. That's the only reason you're stuck there is I don't know it, therefore let's not go there.
I also like the idea too that sometimes when you kill that ego and you take that bold step, it might not be great.
Yeah.
But so many people are afraid of that. And once you make that decision to commit fully, to commit wholly, you might find out like, well, that was a bad choice, but at least you know the tools to move to the next step.
That's right.
In the next step. It's like, you know, sometimes we just get stuck in those patterns because we're afraid to make those changes. And once you can say like, all right, let's kill the ego. Let's move forward.
Yeah.
It might not turn out great right in the beginning, but on a long enough timeline, it will.
Yep. You need to go through uncomfortable things, uncomfortable situations to grow and to get to that other side.
Yeah.
It's so true. And
is that why the chicken crossed the road?
Yeah.
I kind of, when people ask me that now, I kind of want to say that now.
Because there was an ayahuasca ceremony on the other side?
Yeah. To grow. Why the chicken to grow?
Oh, man. I love it.
That's funny. Cool.
Well, thank you for all your advice. I mean, everything you said, like, I know really resonates with us, and we really want to reach our listeners with this kind of message. And
awesome.
We love what you're doing, and just thank you for sharing your life and like your gift with us too. So I appreciate that.
I really appreciate you giving me an opportunity. Yeah.
No, and we will definitely put the information in the show notes, especially so that we can help these veterans.
Cool.
Is there a website or like how do they?
So we currently have a pitch deck that we're using to format the show. I think it's we're going to go with the it was Enlightened Warrior, but we just switched it to Warrior's Journey, I believe.
Okay,
it's the name of the show, but
whenever you know, let us.
Yeah,
and
I'll get you guys
we'll
all
put
that
that in there. Okay, cool.
Yeah, that's so cool.
Yeah, this
awesome.
is
we're shooting for March for the filming is when we're shooting for. Yeah,
perfect.
So I'll be going down there myself in February for another week of ceremony.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Well, we would love to support all of the wounded warriors out there, all the warriors who are going through anything. It's it's the very least that we can do. So we will continue to support you guys and follow allow our listeners insights as to what you guys are doing.
Awesome.
Put that in the show notes, and then that's what Life to the Max is all about. Is we want to change the world. And we're not going to do that with diets and exercise. We're going to do that with conversations like this.
Yes, exactly.
It's so true. I love that. Yes.
Cool.
Thank you, AJ.
Thank you, guys. Appreciate it.
Guys, thank you so much for tuning in to another episode of Life to the Max with the incredible Janna Breslin and Evan DeMarco. Evan DeMarco's not incredible. It's Janna. I love these spontaneous outros.
Right?
Make sure to follow us on iTunes or wherever you subscribe to podcasts. Leave us a 5-star review. Share this with friends and family. This is a great message, and I think this one needs to get out. So thanks so much.
Absolutely. Thank you, guys. Thank you for tuning into the Life to the Max podcast with Janna Breslin and Evan DeMarco. Subscribe to our podcast on your favorite platform, rate and review us to help spread the word. For articles, videos, and more information on retreats and how to connect with Life to the Max, please visit our website at maxlifeforever.com.